Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week comes from Lazy Gaming Guys and the Ronin console. It is Scott. Welcome back, Scott.
Welcome. Glad to be back. Welcome everyone to the episode. It's going to be a fun one today from what I can tell.
Lots of gaming news and some James Gunn stuff. But first, if this is your very first episode of the show, the way we format it is we go through this week's news, and then we end it with the Brokept Block, which is the more personal side of the show, what Scott and I have been up to since you last heard us. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 573. Kicking things off with some video game history, and I know this is something that you're especially passionate about when it comes to game preservation. A study by the Video Game History Foundation reveals that 87% of classic video games are currently unavailable for commercial purchase. So the foundation examined games released before 2010 and determined their availability from there. So remasters generally counted as available, except when it was substantially different from the original. So the results focused on the Commodore 64, Game Boy, and PlayStation 2 systems, and those three were classified as abandoned, neglected, and not very active. A little more active on the PlayStation 2 side than the Commodore 64 or Game Boy as far as games available. The Commodore 64 had only 4.5% of games available, while the PS2 had 12%. The closure of digital stores on these systems, such as more recently like the eShop for Nintendo, does pose a challenge to gaming preservation. So this was all done as hopefully a way to encourage gaming companies to loosen their restrictions on game preservation. So what do you think about this study? Did it kind of floor you a little bit that the number was so high? Was it to be expected? And what do you hope to see happen out of this?
And sadly, with a lot of these game consoles and stuff like that, it's to be expected that, because again, they're doing what is available for commercial purchase. So yeah, I didn't really expect anyone to be able to buy Commodore 64 really anywhere, especially. Like that one did not shock me in the slightest, because I don't even know where you would pick up Commodore 64 on a digital storefront or anything like that. A Game Boy, I mean, Nintendo has been very bad about a lot of their stuff and have been the most active about going after emulation, which is one of the biggest things that's been hurting as far as like the Nintendo archivists, even beyond what's available commercially and just in general archival of games, because they shut down so much stuff. PlayStation 2, in a way, I'm not surprised, because also the PS2 had such a gigantic library of games.
Yeah.
Like the PS2 era was just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. So there's a lot of shovelware. It's like the Wii, like the original Wii, where it's just like they threw everything at it because it was a selling system, and they were going to. So I'm not surprised that most of it's gone, because that 12% could be thousands of games, to be honest. But it is sad that only 12% of the lineup is available. I don't know if I'd want it to get to 100% as far as commercially available, because there is a lot of shovelware crap that is good for preservation, but you just need like a ROM somewhere to be okay with that. But I would like to see that more, at least at 50%, because I feel like that would cover every major PS2 game that anyone would care about.
The one thing that's concerning to me is, the Commodore 64 is very difficult to try to find, unless you're the angry video game nerd who has every one of those games. It seems like, for the most part, you really got to get lucky to find any of those games and have been a longtime collector. I'm just afraid that things like the Game Boy, or even like later on the N64 or the GameCube, become the Commodore 64 of the future, where 50 years from now, either no one will care enough to want to play those GameCube games or old titles, or they just go the way of the Commodore 64, where Nintendo never does any enough remasters or re-releases, and some games just never get reproduced at all. So it's just whatever exists already will be it, unless people get an emulation. It'll have to be something weird where, and I know you've educated me on how some of these gaming companies have used emulation copies to recreate video games and re-release them as remasters. So I'm hoping that other companies are more lax about their emulation. Nintendo will probably be the last of it, but that they can preserve these games digitally, and then from there, if these companies want to pull from those emulations, have some kind of a polished re-release for these old titles, even if they're just collections, if they're just direct ports or whatever. I really hope that the conversion to digital happens more often with these old titles.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, at least thankfully, with a lot of preservation, as long as these companies aren't going after ROMs as much, they still will exist in an emulation, function. I believe for a lot of these games, specifically, like for these consoles, emulation has huge amounts of them cataloged and saved. But as far as technically for the mounts, you can play pretty much every Game Boy game ever made, Commodore 64 and PS2, just not legally on your system. It's more of that gray area. But I also feel we're at a generation where they just don't care to play older games. It's seen more of as a niche thing. They more for the here and now. Okay, this is what I want to play now. This is the new hot thing. What's the next new hot thing comes? Who cares? We don't need it anymore.
Yeah, more for the novelty of it, or people our age.
Yeah, it's more either people like us going back and being like, oh, I remember playing this as a kid or something like that. Or, you do have some younger generation that want to experience some of the games. Where did Final Fantasy start? Where did, Dragon Quest start? Or, Mario, and play some of the old Mario games and things like that, because they are just curious and want to see some of these things. And then there's a lot that just don't care. They'll just buy the new Mario game. Mm-hmm. They don't care about Mario for the NES. Why should they? It doesn't really pertain to this one.
Yeah, exactly. Or even games for me, I can't think of many Commodore 64 games that I would want to play, but someone 10, 15 years older than me might be like, no, I want to play those old Commodore 64 games that I grew up with, ones I never got to play. They have a special attachment to that system. So it seems like it is a generational thing. But for gaming preservation, if anything, I know there's a lot of passionate museums out there, and I know they care about collecting and cataloging every game out there. So hats off to them. And I do, for their sake, I hope that they're able to preserve as many of these as possible.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's some really great video game foundations and history groups. There's one that even does a monthly magazine. They're cataloging every single video gaming magazine ever to exist.
Oh, cool.
And after they finish cataloging it digitally, they then will send it out to people. So you can sign up for a subscription service, and every month you'll get one of these retro gaming magazines. You don't know what you'll get, but you'll get one of them that they're finished archiving.
They're like reprints, right?
No, they're the official, the original.
Oh, shit.
The original ones. After they get them in, they go through and digitally, compile them, and then we'll send them off afterwards to help fund buying new ones that they're missing.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I was going to say, why not keep them in case something happens, because physical media is going to still be around, but if your file gets corrupted or something like that, and I'm sure they have backups, but
Oh, I'm sure they've got multiple backups, but it's the only way that this private company can keep funding to get new, magazines to try and archive this. Plus, they just don't have the space to archive every single one of these things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Media. Even me collecting Nintendo Power and Nintendo Force, I have a couple of long boxes for just that. So imagine EGM and all the other fucking magazines we grew up on.
And regional magazines and stuff like that. Things that just only existed in small niche areas. Stuff like the old, this more applies to trading cards with the old Beckett Pokemon and stuff like that. Where it was just not popularly known one, but it was a magazine. And the Pokemon, that it also covered the games.
Well, staying on gaming and future preservation, so they're going to be collecting all these modern games as well. One day, these titles that we're enjoying today are going to be considered classics. Xbox has bolstered its catalog of IPs and gaming as the federal judge, Jacqueline Scott Corley, I love Jacqueline Scott Corley, always have, has ruled against the FTC's attempt to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So this ruling allows the company to proceed with the $69 billion deal, which could potentially reshape the gaming industry. So the FTC can still appeal, but that seems unlikely, either a good outcome or more than likely what Maceo and I were discussing today is that it's, as we've been saying the whole time, it's just a show. It's just a victory lap to say, look, we did everything we could and reelect us to the FTC board. We literally appealed and everything. So Microsoft is also negotiating with the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK. And this decision followed a hearing where industry figures testified about the impact on competition in the console gaming market. So this included Nintendo, who they were like, yeah, we don't care. This is fine. All these other companies, it seems like Sony was the one putting up the biggest fuss about it. But this is great. Michael Pachter called it last year. And here on the podcast, we were saying every time the Microsoft deal came up, it's going through. It's just a matter of when. And this is a huge step for the company. I saw that Activision Blizzard stock did go up, I want to say at 10%, 11% at some point today. And that's great for their shareholders, and that's great for holders of Game Pass and also for other systems too, because these games, especially the big ones like Call of Duty, now they're going to be on platforms like the Nintendo Switch.
I'm not a huge fan of this whole thing. Well, here's my issue. And it's not at Microsoft because Sony's doing the same things. And I feel like it's the atmosphere of right now and the marketing is that these companies are just buying up other companies. And eventually we're going to end up with no third-party developers in any way, shape, or form because they're going to belong to one of the two companies because Nintendo really just doesn't give a fuck at this point. Like they know they can survive off their first-party stuff without any issues.
Sure.
So you're just going to have Sony and Microsoft just buying up every third-party company until there's just two major companies. And that's it. That's all you're going to have now. There is no major competition between the two because, do you like these exclusives or do you like these exclusives? That's it. That's the only thing is we'll just have three first-party companies. You got to buy all three systems if you want to play everything because this is over here, this is over here, this is over here, this is over here. And it's just, I don't like that. I don't like the concept of third-party company just developing for every system imaginable is just not going to exist.
Well, what happens with...
you won't have Sonic on every system. It'll be, the Sonic is exclusive to Microsoft or Sony now. Too bad.
Well, that's only if...
want to play Sonic Frontiers 2 by, fucking PS6 or Xbox, whatever.
And that's
the way it's meaning right now.
That's if the buyers act like Sony do, because Sony are the ones that are like, these are exclusive to our systems only. Whereas Microsoft is saying, these are all available now on more things than ever because we're going to own them. Now we can put Call of Duty on Nintendo.
I mean, and see Starfield is which was funny with Starfield because it was, I guess Sony paid for that to originally be PS5 exclusive. So Microsoft in retaliation bought the company and then made it an Xbox exclusive.
I'm glad they did because of the way Sony's been behaving throughout this whole thing.
It's funny though that it's okay for Microsoft to buy a whole company to make a game exclusive versus Sony just saying, hey, we want to give you X amount of funding dollars to make this exclusive.
Yes, they were being giant babies.
And so buying a company in retaliation is not being a baby. Well, I don't get that argument.
Phil Spencer was doing what Microsoft should have been doing 10, 15 years ago. So they were letting Sony buy up all these companies, Insomniac, all these guys, and they were just sitting on their hands.
Insomniac just recently was bought out by them. Insomniac was only bought out by them 2020 or 2019.
And that's when they should have been doing these moves. Microsoft, I'm saying. They were just letting them buy up all these companies, and not
these
until
deals have been in the works for years.
Until Phil Spencer got in there
during 2020s.
Until he got in there in 2018, did they start finally making these moves to buy some companies.
The Insomniac one was after 2018.
Well, that's one example. I mean,
So,
if you want, I'll pull up a list of all the Sony bought companies, but I'm just making conversation here.
but I just know that both companies are doing it and I don't like it. And that's the problem, is that the other thing is too, neither company can stop because the other one then won't stop. Like it's almost like an arms race, essentially. Both companies see the other one as, well, if I stop, they're just going to keep going. So neither one is going to stop doing it. And I just see us as the consumers losing to it.
Unless things like FTC, of course, but I don't think we're there yet. There's still so
Right.
many third-party gaming companies that it's not even close to becoming a
Not
monopoly
any
yet.
big ones. Like,
Well,
there's
no
not a
one's
lot of
bought up
big ones still out
Ubisoft.
there.
No one's bought up Sega. I mean, there's still a lot of those
There's no
big
one wants
Square
Ubisoft.
Enix. I think Microsoft should buy those too. Like, maybe not
See,
Sega.
then there's one entire monopoly.
Well, you know what? When they buy up Sega and they buy up Ubisoft, then you can be like, it's a monopoly. And I'll be like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I just don't like that this is the way we're heading. Like, I see it as the writings on the wall that this is the way we're heading. Both companies are going to do this crap, and all we do is lose. Like, these companies will get richer and richer, and we just lose.
Well, speak for yourself, because my stock is very happy right now. and this is, and obviously the
That's
gamers,
only one company,
the Game Pass
but the gamers
gamers,
do lose.
the Game Pass subscribers are very happy about this as well. And I will have that sometime this winter, I'm assuming. So I'll finally get to enjoy some of these titles. And I don't think this deal is going to go through that quick. I don't think we're going to start seeing Activision Blizzard titles on Game Pass by this winter. I really don't know how long it takes for this to fully go through and into effect. It's kind of like when Warner Brothers Discovery merged. It still took like a year for shit to get moving.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how companies are when they merge. Like, you're not going to see immediate effects. Like, there's just no real way for that to happen. Like, it's going to be effects over 2, maybe 3 years even.
Yeah, kind of like even
all they really have to do and like finish up.
Yeah, they're going to have to, just like every company, when there's a merger, put in their own people, do some firings, do some cuts, all that stuff, and merge
and then
departments.
There's contracts that still have to finish through.
Exactly.
There's still things they're going to have to clear through the pipeline. Like, I mean, we're not going to see the effects of this for, I would say, 2 to 3 years. In all honesty.
And we'll continue to follow this closely as the FTC eventually, I think inevitably, does submit that appeal. Next, we've got some anime news as Dragon Ball Super's current manga arc follows the event of the recent film Dragon Ball Super Superhero. So this sparked debates from readers about whether revisiting the movie story is a mistake or an opportunity to add depth to that film. So some fans have expressed impatience for new arcs and the introduction of Black Frieza. So you're a more avid manga reader, and I don't know if a lot of these do it. Maybe Demon's Lair would do like the movie arc or whatever, but how do you feel when you're reading the manga and then they adapt the movie? Do you think it's necessary to the story? Do you think they should skip it and go to the new arc?
Well,
is it a ploy to hold off on the story? What do you think?
So here's the thing. This is the only manga that's ever done it. So, because every other manga, movies are not canon.
Okay.
So they do not care. Just like with the original Dragon Ball Z, none of the movies were canon. So you weren't going to see any content in the manga for it. So Dragon Ball Super is kind of unique in that aspect, and it fucking sucks. It has been just a shitty read to keep reading. Like, oh yeah, I could just watch this 90-minute movie, but instead I got to read this over like 6 to 9 months at least, if not longer, because it's only a monthly series.
So is it a direct adaptation of the film from what you're reading?
100, from what I can tell, it is 100% just a direct adaptation. Mm-hmm. It is just, hey, let's retell the movie in, for a year in manga format. And they're not adding things really. They're not doing anything else. Like, it's just, here you go. Do you like the movie? Great. They did the same with Battle of the Gods, and they did the same with Resurrection F. And those are the 2 worst arcs of the series. Although at least Resurrection F was before the movie.
They skipped Broly, didn't they? They just went straight to the...
Broly was a blurb. It was literally go watch Broly.
Right.
That was it. They did come back to that actually during this arc. because Broly shows up, and they were just like, here's 2 pages explaining the Broly movie. There you go. And I feel like they could have just done that with this too. You know, like if you're not really going to add a bunch of really in-depth stuff, there's no point to just putting the movie in, other than they wanted more time to then write out the next arc, I guess. So it's easier to just do this for a year because you already have the whole blueprint. And I can see why it's pissing off fans, because you're wanting more content instead of just the same content I could have already done.
See, one of the things I like that they did with the Tournament of Power, for example, and I know it's not an adaptation of the anime, it's the opposite from what I understand. But when I read the Tournament of Power, I'm like, oh shit, this is really amazing. Like, I was enjoying the hell out of that. And then I eventually, Kelly and I think got a month of Crunchyroll, and we watched all of the anime up to that point. And I'm like, that's not how it happened in the manga. Like, it was way cooler. Like, for example, Master Roshi, when he went up against Jiren, and it was more explained in the manga as like it was a nod to Ultra Instinct. And then in the anime, they kind of depowered Master Roshi, or made him less epic when he was fighting Jiren, whereas in the manga, he's like, if I were a little younger, I might have been able to match you. Like, I'm like, holy shit, Roshi was a badass. And I was hoping they would have done something like that for the films, but it sounds like they didn't. And that's kind of a shame.
Yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, they added, I think it was 1 chapter before to kind of lead in a little bit from one arc to the next. But it just really hinges on whether you like the Trunks and Mai relationship a lot, because it's just very much like, hey, don't you think they'd make a cute couple? And I'm like, no, she's an adult woman.
Right. I always thought that was
a
weird.
Child. Like, no. But the series really wants you to be like, oh, they're so cute together and they belong together. And it heavily leans into that. And I'm like, this relationship just makes me feel uncomfortable. And no, I'm good. I don't want this to be. And that was like 1 or 2 chapters was just focusing on that, because the manga has the fact it went from an arc and is going into another one, whereas the movie can just pop in wherever, since it doesn't really care about, there's no active series going on, so they don't have to lead into anything. So they did throw in like a chapter or 2 for that, and it was just not good unless you like to get school life drama between Trunks and Mai.
I am subscribed to the manga, so I'll eventually find out for myself exactly how boring I guess this might be. And hopefully, you said it's for a year, so maybe it'll be, 2 or 3 volumes when it comes to the US?
Yeah, most likely. Because, again, it's monthly. We're at the point at this point in the manga, we're at Gohan just starting to fight one of the robots, the androids.
Okay.
So he's doing like his first fight against them.
Gotcha.
Like Piccolo kidnapped Pan and stuff like that. We're getting the first fight.
Well, staying on the topic of anime, Disney's Hulu is rebranding its anime and animation catalog with a new block called Animehem. So it will be a dedicated destination for fans to discover and enjoy a wide range of anime and adult animation content that they have the license to. So with billions of hours already consumed in these genres worldwide, Hulu is aiming to become the ultimate streaming destination for animation. So Animehem will feature popular shows like Futurama, Digimon Adventure, Dragon Ball Z Kai, and Naturo, along with exclusive series. So do you think that we've seen other streaming services like Netflix, like Max in the past, do anime content and have it exclusive or buy up these licenses. Do you think that Hulu could potentially become a destination for cartoons?
I mean, for cartoons, I guess a little bit. As much as Netflix or any of them, there's not a ton there. Like, I mean, they're never going to compete as far as anime goes with Crunchyroll.
Yeah, there's nothing special here.
None of these companies will compete with that. Digimon Adventure, if it's the actual original Digimon Adventure, would compete a bit, because that would be the only streaming service that's available on.
So this one, when I looked it up, it said the 2020 series.
Okay, so that is Digimon Adventure Try, which is available on everything.
Okay.
Like Crunchyroll has that. There's a bunch of, I think even Amazon Prime has that. So it is not anything special. You can again watch it on Crunchyroll. And same with Dragon Ball Z Kai, same with Naruto. Like all of those are on Crunchyroll, which would be their biggest competitor anime wise. So I don't foresee it being that great of a destination for anime. Although I know things like Bleach will be exclusive to it with the Thousand Year Blood War arc, because Disney was the ones that got the rights to that, and they'll be putting it on Hulu. But it's one of those things that, like, yeah, sure, some people, I guess, will buy it for that, but I can see it doing probably better with other animation series like Futurama, because I don't think Futurama is on any other streaming site right now.
Yeah, I think it's always just been on Hulu, from what I understand.
Yeah, which that one's a popular enough series that I think that does pretty well, and I know that they're doing new seasons of it.
Yeah. Oh, it was on Netflix, but I think they probably dropped that out because we used to play it at the comic shop.
Yeah, so they probably got a full license, probably when they started the new seasons of it. So I'm sure that will do well for them, and if they do exclusive series like that, I think they'll do pretty well for animation-wise, as far as competing with things like Netflix or HBO Max and stuff like that. But anime-wise, Crunchyroll is still just always going to be the winner there, because they have such a gigantic log of anime so far right now.
Yeah, it's a chunk of pie that is hard to get into. Definitely stiff competition when it comes to Crunchyroll. I mean, if someone tries to become the premier anime destination, I think they would have to heavily invest in pulling some of these series away from Crunchyroll. And I think these companies are a little trigger shy on that, especially since streaming services aren't as lucrative as they thought they'd be. I know Paramount Plus, I guess on their earnings report, said they have like maybe 2 years left with the way they're going. So I think a lot of these companies are kind of realizing that having your own streaming platform may not have been the best idea.
Yeah, just kind of licensing your stuff out was probably the go-to play, because then you don't take any of the risk with infrastructure or gaining viewers and stuff. You're just going, hey, pay me for this.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're seeing that with the big companies like Warner Brothers Discovery and Disney. Like now they've started licensing out what used to be exclusives to other companies like Amazon. So it's like, they're all like, well, let's recoup some loss because holy shit.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the amount of streaming services go down in maybe 5 years, and just a lot of those companies just start selling off their stuff as far as like the license to stream it.
Well, another cartoon coming our way is Adventure Time Fiona and Cake. So this is a new animated series featuring the gender-swapped characters from Adventure Time, and it will have its first episode premiering at San Diego Comic-Con. So this version of this series will have a more adult-oriented tone and will feature an older version of Fiona, which does match the audience. I think the audience that would be watching it would be the ones that grew up on Adventure Time, and I don't think they're necessarily going to get kids into something like a new Adventure Time series. So I think leaning more towards an older Fiona probably is the better play right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, to be honest. I think that it's a good idea to just go ahead and be like, yeah, we'll just do an older Fiona. It has the chance to be a good series. Well, time will tell once it comes out. Obviously, we'll get our first taste of it with the San Diego Comic-Con, and we'll see how good it is, but it's got a shot. I just feel like it might also be a little too late for Adventure Time at this point.
I agree.
Like, I feel like if this had come out 4 years ago, it would have had a much better chance.
Yeah, I hope they managed.
I don't know how well the other series did that was on or HBO Max.
Right, yeah. I don't think we ever got those numbers. I mean, obviously they're doing more with the series with Fiona and Cake, but we don't really know how well that series sold when they released it on Blu-ray or streaming numbers either. But yeah, I really hope they managed their expectations with this, because there's less people watching or caring about Adventure Time, even their fans. And as I mentioned, you're not going to get a new audience into Fiona and Cake with it. If anything, you just hope that a bunch of the Adventure Time fans return to this. I know Kelly and I will be checking it out because we do like Adventure Time. We like Fiona and Cake. We picked up the comic books when those released for both of the series, Adventure Time and Fiona and Cake. So it's exciting to us. And I know Leo likes some Adventure Time. He's not that into it. So as long as it didn't cost them an arm and a leg to produce this show, and they could make it, decently animated without spending a ton on it, then they probably will do okay with it. But yeah, if they dunked a ton of money into it, then I think they're in trouble.
Yeah, agreed.
So this is something that's going to affect all buyers, all consumers, as talks between UPS and the Teamsters Union have broken down, increasing the likelihood of a strike. So how does this relate to anything? Well, if you purchase anything online at all, it's going to affect you. But more specifically, Diamond Comic Distributors, who definitely delivers through UPS, ended up talking about this because they needed to put out a statement, because along with anything that's bought online, obviously comics are going to be affected by this too. So they assured retailers that they are taking measures to minimize disruptions in product deliveries, which is especially essential in the comic market and book market as things come out every single week. So this strike, again, could impact various businesses, including comic book distributors, publishers, online stores. And I know that it's going to take a hit on the economy too, because the last time UPS went on strike, all of the companies suffered because shipment got out slower, product didn't get out as quick, they didn't sell as quickly, or didn't turn over product as quickly. I mean, that just has a domino effect that goes throughout. And, I'm of two minds on this one, because I do believe in fair treatment of employees. And I know UPS, I mean, those workers, they really they bust their ass, man. Since I worked at GameStop, the comic shop, I mean, you see these UPS workers and they are hauling ass. They are worked to the bone. I used to work with a UPS part-timer as well. And, I want the best treatment for them. I want them to be happy. But at the same time, it's going to hurt the economy. And I'm not as concerned with that because it will bounce back. But, for a little bit, it's going to be, just a little bit of patience as talks eventually, hopefully, work out between UPS and the union here.
Yeah, hopefully we do have those kind of minimal disruptions, especially from Diamond, because that's, I think, the only one that would actually affect me personally, since most of the time, whenever I order things, it comes through USPS. But Diamond is definitely one of those ones that will directly affect me. I hope that, UPS, they get it kind of taken care of, and that these employees do what they need to do in order to have good, stable working conditions. But at the same time, that is going to be an issue. So I just want my comics. I can't get my Sonic comics and my Power Rangers comics. That I'm going to have some issues.
You won't have issues. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who, if I still worked at the shop, I'd be able to share with you guys how they're assuring retailers. I think next time I'm at the comic shop, I'll ask the guys and see if, just out of curiosity, if they're going to switch it to FedEx, this Diamond distributors, or, I mean, they might be able to get, I'm sure UPS is their best deal right now as far as shipping, but, if they're able to present this to another distributor or another shipping company, they can say, hey, we'll shift over to you guys for a year. What kind of rate can you give us? And maybe they're able to break out a deal that way, because it's just a matter of a different company coming in to pick up your packages, your shipment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all it is for them. It would be more for FedEx or USPS to figure out as far as logistics. For the most part, the company is just more worried about the price, and that's about it.
Here we're moving on over to further disruption as Warner Brothers Discovery continues its woes and spiral and sell-offs, as well as they're trying to make up billions of dollars in debt. So this one, Cartoon Network Studios, will be closing its iconic headquarters in August as it merges with Warner Brothers Animation. So the move follows the merger announcement by Warner Brothers Discovery last year. Former general manager Brian Miller confirmed the news on Twitter, stating that everyone will be moving to a Warner Brothers building as one animation unit. I mean, obviously there's pros and cons to this, having everything under one roof. I mean, as a streamline to a company, that's a good thing. But when it comes to creatives or creative output, that's definitely going to be an issue, because now you're going to be, under one management or let's say 3 management teams instead of 6 or 7. And you're no longer independent in a way. It's kind of, I feel like there's less creative output through this manner rather than if they were their own separate studio. And, I use separate loosely because they're still under the big umbrella, but there's some operation that happens independently when they do get their own studio.
Yeah. It's also just one of those things. Like, I mean, that place is iconic. It's where Cartoon Network's been for decades, literally. So it really, it hurts to see. I get it in a way, but it also just really morally hurts. And I think it hurts a lot of those animators as well, just kind of mentally, because of the fact that now you're going to have to, move over to this whole studio. You now don't have the place that you kind of were comfortable with. It was kind of your second home away from home. Now there's this whole new thing. It's run by whole different groups of people with different rules, different regulations. It's just one of those things that it sucks to see. But I also think that, unfortunately, Cartoon Network and even Nickelodeon have pretty much gone down the drain so hard that they only have maybe 3 or 4 shows at best in production at any one time anymore.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Most of the day you're just seeing on Cartoon Network reruns, things like Teen Titans Go, and maybe some new episodes of Teen Titans Go specifically. And Nickelodeon, you're pretty much just seeing SpongeBob and new episodes of that. Some of their, like, Nick Jr. type stuff.
Paw Patrol.
Networks, will do pretty well. Like, they still pump out stuff. But their actual, like, real cartoon lineup for kind of older kids and stuff is pretty much gone at this point. Because I think that someone mentioned before that currently Cartoon Network, the only show in production that we know of is Teen Titans Go. That is it. That is the only show that is not just reruns and is getting new episodes. And that's such a sad state of affairs.
I wonder who's doing that Fiona and Cake thing then. Because that was a Cartoon Network show, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe it was one that wasn't announced. It very well could have not been announced at the time. So it was the only one that we knew was in production was Teen Titans Go. And that could be the thing, was they were keeping this a secret, since obviously they've been working on it for a few years now, or at least a year or two since they're pumping out a new episode. Or at least you hope that they've been working on it for like at least a year, since if not, the quality will absolutely show.
When I put out the news bit on this, the graphic, I put the Spirit Halloween thing. Are you familiar with that joke?
Yes.
Okay, because someone on Instagram was confused. They're like, what does Spirit Halloween have to do with this? And I'm like, I'm not going to fucking take the time to explain this.
It's a simple joke, and it's a funny joke. Like, I've seen that meme like everywhere. Like,
yeah,
Splash Mountain.
It's a classic.
Like, you saw like the Spirit Halloween logo over it and stuff like that. That's just a classic joke. Yeah, I don't get why people don't understand that one.
Some people must have just gotten on the internet this month or something. I don't know.
I guess.
Well, here we have one of the most hated guys in the industry right now, GQ Magazine. They edited and later removed a critical article about Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav after alleged complaints from his camp. So this resulted in the author of this article requesting their name to be removed and the piece being pulled. So this dispute arose over the author's portrayal of Zaslav as, quote, the most hated man in Hollywood, end quote, with Warner Brothers Discovery claiming the article had inaccuracies and lacked fact-checking, while the author argues that the edits were driven by the company's preferences. I think this was a poor move by Warner Brothers Discovery because it shows that there's a bit of truth to it. You know what I mean? Like, if they had just been like, oh, fuck, I don't care, like, speak, like, up to this point, he seemed like a guy that didn't give a shit. Like, I don't care if I'll cut shows, I'll cut costs, I don't care. In one way, I admired that. But for him to suddenly be like, well, I'm not so sure about this little article over here. And I guess I get GQ is big, but by him saying, no, we got to change some of those things, that I'm like, come on, dude. Like, now you're showing that there is some cracks in that armor.
He's kind of a piece of shit. He is the reason we have a bunch of lost media. The fucking 2020s. Like, the lost media really shouldn't be as major of a thing because we had whole movies just being destroyed and thrown away. We also had like them clearing out archives and just like destroying the archives, tossing them dumpsters.
The sets as well. The backlot sets got destroyed.
Is like insane that anyone would do that. Like, you're
Burn them down.
basically like the worst person in Hollywood because you are a piece of shit. Like, we talked about video game preservation. Well, here was movie and film preservation that was just destroyed in front of us for a tax credit. And it's a piece of garbage thing to do. Like, Zaslav should be called out for it. And clearly, some of the issues he did have because went out and got this removed. Because, oh, how dare they say that? Clearly, some of it must have been true.
It makes him look worse.
It makes him look worse than he already was, which, I mean, that's honestly impressive to make him look worse than he already was. Like, he was already, in a lot of people's eyes, like the movie equivalent to like Hitler, just destroying shit. Like, yeah, make him look worse. That's insane, but it's what's happening. And I find it funny that they went after GQ for this, but also kind of sad. It also, is against journalism in that aspect.
Right. Yeah.
Again, you could point out, it'd be one thing to just point out the inaccuracies of it and just leave it at that. Just be like, yeah, he called this out incorrectly or this was misquoted, and then just leave it at that.
Sure.
But
or like
if you want to sit there and get this whole thing like removed, and it's like, why? Why were you so adamant to have it fully removed?
Why don't they normally do instead like a editor's note? Warner Brothers Discovery responded to this by saying the following, one of those at the end of the article.
Yeah, that's saying like, this was horribly misquoted, and he actually, in the full thing said this, so give a new quote or something like that, or add more context to it type of thing. Like, normally you would just get an editor's note and that would be it. That would be the end of the story. It was just, yep, here's an article, here's an editor's note showing why you should maybe think about this art differently in certain aspects, and call it a day. But they were so adamant to have it fully removed. And
GQ crumbled.
Yeah. And it's just sad to see. And it's also like, why Warner Brothers Discovery? Is it just because you are going through all this bankruptcy and everything else that you're just like, oh, anything can hurt us? Like, we need to be so careful now because of all this stuff.
Yeah, this is one of those
other sets you burned. You probably could have just sold at this point for the money.
Yeah.
They could have still been living somewhere.
The way he's gone, okay, there's so many things about this that I'm like, I would have done it differently if I were him. I understand cutting costs, and last year I was championing a lot of these not the burning of sets, but other cancellations like the Batgirl film. And then now, when I heard about the Warner Brothers sets getting destroyed, and they were like, okay, well, we're paying how much money just to upkeep these every year by repainting them, by upkeeping them, by fixing them. We're using them for, I guess, the Warner Brothers studio lot. They're not filming anything anymore. They're instead destroying them and making, green screen studios, because that's the future or whatever. You see Disney do it with The Mandalorian. But I don't know. I feel like I would have done this a different way. I don't know if there is an easier way, but I would have been more concerned with the direction that their media is going, because they are a media company, rather than what's being upkept on the Warner Brothers set. And instead of face the decisions you're making instead. I get that he bought a sinking ship and things were already going down, like the Flash film and all that shit. But at the same time, you appointed someone like James Gunn, who's not going to give you quality product, and you're going to continue to lose money on these things. So some of that shit is on you too, Zaslav. And
yeah, it's not all previous decisions.
Yeah, we were just talking about how it takes some time for these things to start to take into effect, but we're getting to that period now where it's like, all right, well, some of these things now, you're going to have to take the blame for them. And I don't think it's getting any better for Warner Brothers Discovery. And that includes the recent performance of this Flash film, as the recent box office continues to decline with a drop of 58% in just its fourth week, and a total domestic earning of $105 million. This puts it out of the top 10 at the box office already. So the upcoming DC releases include Blue Beetle and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which apparently Tom Cruise saw. I don't know if this was a meme or fake news. I didn't dig into it that much. But supposedly Tom Cruise, he famously saw The Flash and he was like, it was amazing. Turns out it was a giant, piece of trash. And now he's saying Blue Beetle is exactly the kind of movie we need right now. And it's like, what the hell are you doing, Tom? Like, stick to just making films. Like, let's not.
Maybe they let him have some IMAX theaters. And so he was like, yeah, this is going to be great.
I guess of what I hear the rumors, and I don't believe it, but some people are saying that he wants a role in the DC universe. But I don't think they can fucking afford him, man. I think that's bullshit.
Yeah, I don't see that as a thing. I maybe could be wrong, but I don't see that as a thing. Maybe back when it was actually making some money, but nowadays, like, there's no way.
No, and those two movies are going to be big losses for him as well, Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2. And The Flash is already considered by many people, because of the loss in millions, the worst performing comic book film of all time.
God, that's pretty bad. Like, when you're doing worse than like Ghost Rider and
that's the
Ghost
thing,
Rider sequel.
Because those movies didn't cost over $250 million to make. This movie, with all its reshoots, minimum cost $300 million. After marketing is all said and done, you double that number to $600 to $650 million. It's going to lose them $300+ million when it's all said and done. And I can't think of any other movie that flopped that hard that cost this much money.
No, because normally back then, a lot of these superhero movies were just budget films. So it's kind of like, it may not make huge amounts of money, but like it does enough to get its money back.
Well, that's exactly like you brought up Ghost Rider 2.
Steel.
I can look one of these up. Like Ghost Rider 2, it had a budget of $75 million. It made $132 million at the box office.
Yes, but even if you adjust for inflation, it would still have made more than its money back, because like it still made a positive amount.
And I feel like Steel did okay, even. Like, I remember I watched it as a kid.
I did not watch that as a kid.
I
saw the trailer as a kid, but
so Steel. Oh shit! Well, Steel didn't lose this much. The budget was $16 million. Box office was $1.7 million. Still lost way less than The Flash.
Yeah, that was quite a bit of a loss. So that's the only competition The Flash has for like terrible loss on a superhero movie.
Yeah, if we're talking percentage wise, it would be Steel, I guess. Steel lost, what is it, $15 million plus marketing, so probably lost them about $25 million, whereas The Flash is losing $300 million. Oh man, I love it. I'm dancing on it. And there's more failure. More failure coming our way, as James Gunn's Superman film has received backlash for its casting choices. So Isabella Merced, Eddie Gathegi, and Nathan Fillion are set to star as Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, and Green Lantern Guy Gardner, respectively. So this casting has sparked criticism due to concerns that the film is rushing multiple characters onto the screen without solo films. So this seemingly an attempt to try to catch up to Marvel Studios. Many in the DC community have expressed disappointment and mixed reactions towards the casting decisions and Gunn's approach. As of today, Scott, he also announced that Metamorpho is in this Superman film. So now this movie is packed with fucking DC characters.
Is it even a Superman film at this point?
Exactly. Like, is this even a Superman film? What establishment do these characters have? I mean, the audience is going to be confused. I'm not saying that every one of these need their own solo film, but I mean, this is an overstuffed movie.
I mean, you got to figure, at least with Justice League having a bunch of characters, there was kind of a point. It was the Justice League versus Superman. Okay, why do we need Guy Gardner, Mr. Miracle, in Superman or Mr. Terrific? Like, why are they there?
Right.
What is that adding?
Yeah.
And then to also throw in Hawkgirl and also throw in, what is this adding for Superman himself? Like, it's not like, oh, well, we're, here, someone was, now done as Doomsday or something like that, where it's like, oh, okay. Like they're throwing a villain in there or something. Like, nah, these are all other heroes for the most part.
Yeah, other heroes. You've got Superman, Lois Lane got cast. Lex Luthor is going to be in this movie. And I mean, it's exactly what you were saying. I would almost sort of understand if it was like, okay, here's Krypto, here's Superboy, here's Supergirl, like establishing the Metropolis or Superman family. Like, I would sort of understand. I would
Yeah,
still
or
not
even
be
a
a
Power
fan of it.
Girl or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. But now we're getting into like, okay, well, here's a Green Lantern also, and here's a Hawk Girl, and here's it's like, why are we doing that? Like, how come it's not rushed? And I put this up on Facebook, this criticism, and someone's like, well, this is okay because they're not major characters. So I'm like, that doesn't make a difference. That's still overstuffing the movie with these characters. They might not be Wonder Woman or Superman, but they're still, it's a fucking Green Lantern. It's a Thanagarian. Like these are
Yeah, I thought Guy Gardner was a decently enough popular
sure.
Green Lantern. Plus, I mean, if you were going to make a Green Lantern movie, you'd probably, at this point in this day and age, you'd probably do like a few, Green Lantern Corps type of thing.
Mhm.
So he would be part of that Green Lantern Corps. I'm guessing that's what he was trying to set up for with this. But even then, this is too many characters to be, oh, well, don't worry, it's just a cameo at the end of the movie type of thing. Like one of these would be, okay, yeah, they're Guy Gardner. Got it. They're probably just going to use them as like the surprise at the end or something. But no, it's like, here's 4 or 5 of them. Well, why? Like, what is this adding? Like, why does he need to meet Hawk Girl, Mr. Terrific, and Guy Gardner, and Superman? Because to your point, the rest of the Super Family, something like that, or even more villains, like, Lex Luthor and Brainiac team up. So this, there's a Brainiac cast or something like that. Oh, okay. That'll be interesting for Superman to have to fight or something. Like, no, here's a bunch of other random heroes. Are you sure this isn't a Justice League thing? Or something like, no, it's Superman. Don't worry. Superman's going to play the important role.
Well, and by the casting choices, it literally shows again that they're out of money because these are not A-list actors. No disrespect to who they picked, but they're not big, man. There's not a big draw. And this is something that I talked about 2-3 weeks ago of like, look, they're not, I mean, when they announced the cast for Superman, it's like, who is that? Like, I get that they sometimes cast non-name actors like they did in a way with Henry Cavill, but then, as I said before, it was supported by Lawrence Fishburne, Amy Adams. It had big names behind it as a supporting cast. Here, I mean, your biggest name is, I guess, Nathan Fillion, who's like a TV star at this point.
The only one I recognize.
Yeah.
And like, he's a decent, like, I mean, he's a great actor and stuff like that. And but he's not what you would call an A-list
No.
actor. He's, I would say maybe B-list, like he's up there. And he was probably the most expensive one on this casting list. But at the same time, that's not saying much. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you compare that to your point. Some of these other ones, it's like, yeah, Henry Cavill wasn't a very big actor at the time either, but had, all of the supporting actors and actresses that are what people went and watched the movie for or something like that. Because it'd be one thing if, okay, Superman's not a big actor, but Lex Luthor is, okay, people are going to watch it because Lex Luthor, then they'll be like, oh, this Superman's good or whatever. And that might raise them to popularity, but they went and watched it originally because of the other actor. But there's nothing here to draw you in.
Yeah, this is not.
If you're one of the characters or people that care about like a good like group of, this is not one of those movies.
And I'm for these, the DC universe. That's where my heart is. And if you had told me, yeah, we're gonna have Mr. Miracle's gonna be on the big screen at some point, or not Mr. Miracle, Mr. Terrific, which I'm sure he'll do his own Mr. Miracle as well. But that would have been like, oh, that's exciting. But now it's like, under what budget? And the writer and this, this studio head, James Gunn, who's under David Zaslav, like, none of this is appealing to me.
No, like, it just seems like a last ditch attempt. And we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but James Gunn has not really written anything very good. Like, I'd have to look up his whole writing career, but what I can tell, like, he's never really written anything good in his life. Because the first Guardians of the Galaxy was probably his best work from him that I've seen, and that was ripped off. Like, he just ripped off someone else's script. So it's like, okay, so even then, he didn't write it. So that's why it was the best one. And even the parts I didn't like were probably the parts he threw in there. Like,
sure. Yeah, or we were saying that Dawn of the Dead was rewritten by Zach and one of his screenwriters. So it's like, all right, well, that's not a Gunn thing either. Like, he just had the writing credit because his script was the original one.
And picks it up and be like, oh, well, this needs to be removed. This is crap. And so it's like, yeah, when the movie is he's the final writer, you're hoping pretty garbage. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, 3, that live action Scooby-Doo crap. Like even Lollipop Chainsaw. I know that's like a cult classic, but I feel like it's more for the gameplay than it is
He wrote
for
that?
writing. I hear his name attached to it all the time. I can quickly verify, but
Yeah, as you were saying, it was mainly, I mean, I remember selling it at GameStop, and it was the sex appeal, right? I mean, that was the main thing about it. You didn't have a game quite like that, at least here in the US.
it was the fact that it was like a sexy B movie horror thing. So that's what people liked about it. Yeah. Writers were James Gunn and Masahiro Yuki.
Do you recognize that second name?
Nope.
Okay. I was just curious.
Doesn't even have a he doesn't even have a Wikipedia entry.
I wonder if they wrote most of it. I'm seeing,
but
I'm seeing
it
an
explains
IMDb.
why. Like,
Yeah.
there's
The last thing they wrote was Lollipop Chainsaw back in 2012. Before that, they did Liberation Maiden, Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, and the 25th Ward, The Silver Case. So they're either not working anymore or who knows.
No, but they were, you think, old classic writer, because Silver Case is a very popular one along with Fatal Frame.
Okay.
But their repertoire isn't very big, and they probably listened a lot more to Gunn's thing because he was the bigger writer at the time. You know, like when you're going to attach a director like that or a writer like that, you're going to have to, like, I would feel that writer would have a lot more of like, I have to listen to his stuff for company mandates because they spent all this money on him.
I just saw
he was the one that bring in the money.
I just saw the cast list to Lollipop Chainsaw, and of course his brother Sean Gunn is in there, but also Jimmy Urine was in there. He voiced Zed. He's the guy that recently went down for pedo charges. That's one of his friends. Like he was in both Guardians films. He was in Lollipop Chainsaw apparently. Yeah, that guy's in jail.
I mean, I guess he should be apparently.
Well, I guess my point is their relationship went even further. Like that's crazy, all the way back to Lollipop Chainsaw 2012. Ugh.
Yeah, apparently, and when he directed the 2021 Suicide Squad, Lollipop Chainsaw was part of his influence when depicting Harley's starry-eyed way of looking at life.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means. I didn't even see that fucking film.
I don't know. There's some kind of Harley vision.
Oh, weird. Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
He took inspiration from Lollipop Chainsaw.
Whatever. Sounds ridiculous. Sounds dumb.
It's a cult classic, but it's a dumb game.
Well, we will continue to... I can't help but cover this shit, man. It's just so bad. I gotta cover it. It's terrible. So we will continue to follow this spiral downward in the DC universe. But that does round out our news for this week. Let's head into the final portion of today's episode, the Bro Kept Block, which is what Scott and I have been up to since you last heard us. So Scott, what have you been playing, watching, or reading? What's been making you broke since you were last on?
I've been playing a little bit of video games, not too much, but I did play through, beat, and platinum trophy Sonic Frontiers.
Oh, what'd you think of Frontiers now that you finished it fully?
You can tell that Ian had quite a bit of handicaps in writing with it from studio mandates, but the Tails Sonic dynamic is so like he was able to get away with a lot that was really good.
That's good.
I guess they didn't change a lot of that dynamic because his writing really shines through. And I thought that was the strongest relationship in this game by far. I also really enjoy Eggman. A lot of his dialogue made it through very well. Like you see a little bit of a softer side to Eggman, and you'll see like kind of good comedy in there and more of the banter of the fact that while Eggman hates Sonic, he does respect him because he still somehow manages to win and defeat these things.
Yeah, I really
I can respect him, but I can hate him.
I love Ian Flynn's Eggman because, as you said, there is that mutual respect between the two characters. Even in the comics recently, they had a truce to be able to escape I forgot which villain it was at the time. It was Surge, and how she was destroying the environment basically. And he's like, "Oh, we got to have a truce." And then as soon as they're done with the truce, he literally tries to kill Sonic while he's down. And then I think he was out of bullets or something. He's like, "Oh, whoops! All right, we're out of here." And he escapes with metal.
Yeah. And I love that the game canonized a lot of things that, like, yeah, no, this all happened in the game universe. So we did get, like, when Sage, the new character, is trying to convince Eggman to work with Sonic, she mentions things like, well, you've done it before. There is a precedence with, like, Neo Metal, and stuff like that. And she brings up multiple times they work together. Be like, there is a precedence for it. And he's like, yeah, but that was then, this is now,
Yeah.
I don't see the necessity of it currently. And when it gets to the point where there is a necessity that you can't overlook anymore, it's like, okay, fine. We're at the point where we do have to work together. And I love his way of getting around it. It's just, okay, well, now you work for me and I'm ordering you to go defeat the giant creature, So Sonic's just like, okay, whatever, helps sleep at night. But it's a really cool thing. The game is great other than the garbage parts. The third island of the game is absolute trash. Worst part of the game. Hope you really like pinball because you need it for plot progression. That is the only thing I would never redo, is that is what would keep me from ever replaying the game fully, is that third island. Everything else, very fun. Although it doesn't feel as much like a Sonic game because of the overworld. But if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts about it, we'll be doing our game club. And this is the reason I played it, is like Lazy Gaming Guys, we have a game club every month. At least so far it's every month. We haven't done any longer games yet. But yeah, at the last Wednesday of the month, you'll hear our thoughts on Sonic Frontiers, as we'll be going in depth and, talking about it. And then we'll be deciding on our next month's game, which is pretty cool. But yeah, overall, I think the game is very good and very fun. True ending is kind of annoying to get. And I also don't know what true ending is, as far as, like, I beat the game. And that was the last thing I did. Like, I did 100% of the game, beat the game, saw the ending and the epilogue. And then I found out to get true ending, you have to beat the final boss on hard difficulty, which unlocks an actual secret boss that you have to defeat.
Oh, cool.
And then you get, the
like in
secret
previous
boss
games.
is, the secret boss is a little rough if you're not good at Ikaruga or bullet hells, but specifically Ikaruga, because it has the same type of, you can change from white or black, and you can absorb the shots from the same color, but get hit by shots of the opposite color.
Yeah.
So you're constantly swapping back and forth. So you have to be really good at that. But if you beat that, you get the ending and then an epilogue. But I did it, and I got the same ending and epilogue that I got when I beat the game. So I'm like, was beating the game 100% also a thing for getting the epilogue? Because I know, like, that's how Kingdom Hearts does it. Was you could either beat the game on the hardest difficulty to get the true ending and the epilogue, or if you 100% the entire game, you also got the same ending, like the true ending.
So there's a couple ways to get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that there might be, and that people just weren't talking about it for whatever reason, like the other ways. But since most people would probably just beat the final boss on hard and do the battle, but I did do it. I did beat that final boss on hard and beat the extra boss battle, just because I wanted to say, at least if nothing else, I got it legitimately.
Sure.
So that's what most of my time's been going into, and then a little bit of Final Fantasy 16. I have to play more of Final Fantasy 16. That game is fantastic.
Nice.
And a lot of fun.
Is that something that you guys will be streaming on Lazy Gaming Guys at any point? You or Julian?
I don't know Julian doesn't have a PS5, so he can't stream it.
I don't know if he was playing on PC or something.
It is only currently available on PS5.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The PC port is in the works. It's just, it will be out a little bit later, because they couldn't fully optimize it for PC for a same release date.
Okay.
And it's also been Sony's thing now, is that they're releasing a game and then about half a year to a year after the PC port comes out.
So kind of like streaming with movies.
Yeah. So the PC port is being worked on. It's in the works. It's just not out yet. But you will probably need a very good PC
Sure. Yeah,
because
especially if you're playing.
even with next gen consoles, it's really pushing a lot of them. Some people even were saying that the final boss is causing overheating issues
Wow.
because of so much going on if you're playing on like the high graphics setting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're going to need a decent PC to be able to play this game and not just a run-of-the-mill one, because it is a game made for, next-gen consoles. And I'm sure you'll probably see it on Xbox Series X at some point. That's the other thing with a lot of these, is that there's been a lot of games that are timed exclusives that are just never advertised as timed exclusives. We've seen that recently with like Ghostwire Tokyo and stuff like that, where it did pop up on Xbox One. So
yeah, that's one of the better games too that you were saying.
Yeah, I love that game, but it showed up like a year later or so. So I wouldn't be surprised if Final Fantasy 16 does the same type of thing, where it's actually just a timed exclusive and then it'll be out on everything a little bit later. But that's been most of what I've been doing. I have been reading a manga called Pumpkin Scissors, for anyone that's curious. Very good manga series. Deals with a European style town, vaguely European, and after a major war, kind of like a World War I scenario, and the after effects of war, and it tries to deal with them in a very real way, as you're following a group that is dealing with war damages, as they call it. So a war relief effort to deal with the leftover people, that like soldiers that just can't deal with not fighting anymore, that just decide to take over towns or things like that, and kind of how to deal with people that have had a lot of trauma from everything. So it's a very dark series, and it tries to deal with the after effects of war and what that kind of means for a country in a very real scenario that's very well done, in my opinion, and a very personable, like a very personal level of like, you're seeing the effects on the average person, but you're also seeing the effects as a nation as a whole. Technology, it deals with a lot with the advancement of technology and how when a technology advances so much that kind of ends a world as you know it, and it becomes a whole new frontier and a whole new world. And should you really hold on to the past just because that's the one you're familiar with, or should you embrace the unknown? So it's very interesting, very well done. I don't recommend the anime at all, but the manga I very highly recommend.
Well, there you go. Once again, a mini episode of Ronin Console. When it's not you, it's Millennial Mike, and when it's not you, it's Sam.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Did you want to talk about your Disney trip yesterday before we go into a little bit of my pickups?
Quickly mention it. So yeah, I was able to do a behind the scenes tour of Kilimanjaro Safari. Really fun, really entertaining and informative. One fun fact I did find out is that the painted dogs that are over there are all named after Batman characters.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. The ones you mentioned were Oswald Cobblepot, and then Riddler.
Just straight Riddler.
And if you have Disney Plus, there's a show called Magic of Animal Kingdom, I think it is. During season 2, they actually talk about it and they mention all of the names for all of them. They are all Batman characters. Yeah, they are 100% Batman themed.
Yeah, and to any non-Disney visitors, the Kilimanjaro Safari is one of the rides or attractions at Animal Kingdom, where you basically take like a safari truck or car, whatever you want to call it, and you go through the quote-unquote safari, and you see live animals, kind of like almost like a ride-through zoo type of thing. You see zebras and lions, hippos, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool. You never know what you're going to see because they are live animals out doing their thing. So it's one of those things that like every time you go through, it's different because of that. But it's really cool. So that was one of the fun facts I learned.
When you did behind the scenes, did you actually like walk out onto the field?
No, you are in the vehicle the whole time. They do drive around in the different backstage areas where like they hold like the areas where they're held at night and stuff like that. There's the quarantine areas for when they first arrive at the zoo or the Animal Kingdom, or if they are coming from like a different zoo or something like that, or if they do get sick, where they put them. I guess 2 of the black rhinos are on loan from some Saudi prince. Like,
Okay.
that's another fun fact. I guess just some rich Saudi prince was like, yes, you can care for my rhinos. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was not excited about waking up super early in the morning to go to it, but it was a lot of fun overall.
Nice. I'm glad you had fun and were able to do that backstage experience. It's not too often that people can do those things for any other rides. So that's pretty awesome.
No.
I did end up getting some CGC stuff back, and Bobby, of course, helps us out with that. I put up, by the time this releases, a short video on our YouTube channel. It's about a 2-minute, 3-minute little unboxing, just a close-up showcase of these 3 pieces, which they are, 2 of them are from the signing that the Artgerm Studios was doing with CGC. So he had the full range of artists that are under his mentorship. But in this case, I ended up sending in for Stanley Lau, Artgerm himself, and for Eiji Kude, who did the Morgan Darkstalkers MegaCon exclusive variant. So I sent that in, got it signed and graded. And then for Artgerm, I did the Harley Quinn #1, the Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti. I want to say it's the 2nd series that they did, but it's the Artgerm variant where she's blowing a kiss. And that cover actually ended up getting turned into a statue a couple years after that variant released. But the variant itself, they both came back 9/8, so very high grades, basically near perfect. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get a Gem Mint 10. I doubt they hand those out ever, but 9.8 is as good as it gets.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone that want to get an actual 10 on those.
Yeah. Do you own any 9.8s yet?
I do not. The only one I have, 0.4.
Is an Action Comics 9.4, you said?
Yep. And that's a George Perez comic, or George Perez cover. And that was going to be one of the ones we're signing. But yeah, it's Superman in Batman's colors. It's really cool. Love it. But
yeah, well, hopefully
only a 9.4. So,
well, I bet you some of the recent comics you sent in you'll probably nail something higher than a 9.4 at some point, especially. Yeah.
And considering that was just one that I bought off eBay, that's pretty good to get a 9.4.
The last item I got graded was the first video game grading that I think between you and I that we've done. Even Bobby sent in someone, but his was rejected. I ended up sending in the Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and that came back a 9.6, which I wasn't sure what it was going to come back as because it did have a sticker initially when I bought it on the cover. And it's all shrink wrap, but they still put a sticker on the front, and Kelly was able to remove it. But because the sticker was on there and it's very thin plastic, it left like this rectangular shape on the shrink wrap itself. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's really. So I don't know if that's why they knocked it, but 9.6 is still great. I'm happy with the presentation. I like that CGC does clear casing instead of like that frosted casing for their grades. So it really makes the comic or video game or card stand out a lot more. It looks cleaner to me. That's just my personal preference, and I like their labeling a lot too. So overall, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't know what my next video game would be that I would send in. If I do send in another one, I'm a little more concerned with sending in comics or cards at this point. But it was just kind of cool to see that, their video game casing and how they did it.
Yeah, their case looks really nice for the games. I'm probably going to submit mine in next time, but some I'm a little more worried to send in than others because if something happens to them, they're a little harder to replace with the Pokemon ones.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that might be something that maybe on site, or I know that you can, I don't know if they still do it, but you used to be able to pre-COVID make an appointment with CGC, drive down to Sarasota, drop them off in person, like right at their headquarters. Obviously, you'd spend some gas, but you'd basically make it up in shipping because shipping ends up being like over $20 anyway. So I don't know if they do that anymore, but
that maybe you just wait until MegaCon.
Or MegaCon. Yeah, if I know some people don't trust even that, but I've had good experiences with MegaCon drop-offs.
Yeah, and I can see people not trusting that as well because, they're there for the whole convention and then they have to pack it all up. So if they miss a box or something, then whoops.
What'd you insure it for? $90? Here you go.
Yeah, that'll be one thing. I think the first thing I'll probably send in, just because I'm not as worried about it, is my Greatest Hits King of Hearts 1.
That's a good one.
Sealed. That one is sealed, so I'll send that one in probably. Yeah, Square Enix just sells them on their website for $20 still.
Shit.
they're the greatest hits version, but I'm like, okay,
Still,
it's 20
yeah.
bucks for a sealed copy. Like, I'll go ahead and grade that.
That's a
I'll
good
eventually
idea. Maybe I
grade
should
my
do that.
actual copy, but
Do you know what that's going for currently? Like, are they selling that? I know some of these companies like will sell them at less than value, especially like IDW or some of their comics sometimes. But do you know what the going value is right now for Kingdom of Hearts, the
find out.
greatest hits? And that's for the first one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is the original Kingdom Hearts 1.
I just did a quick search on eBay as well.
Looks about $20.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on eBay. $25, $20.
Although someone's selling a graded one for $285.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I saw one here for $274. I've never heard of that grading company. Oh, WADA.
I guess WADA doesn't care about the labels on there because I see one with like that sticker, kind of like your Mario had, and it was a 9.4 with the sticker still on it.
I wonder if they still knock it for that,
would have left. Yeah, but I wonder why someone would have left that sticker on there because no one wants that shit. Like, I would not buy that with that shit's still on there. Like,
that's
oh yeah,
sealed.
here's this giant ass shipping label on there.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, that's dumb.
Because it's like it's right there on the cover, just blocking the artwork. And if you're gonna get a game graded, you're doing it purely for the artwork.
Sure.
And the potential value in the future. But whoever's buying it is also wanting the artwork. It's a display piece, since you're obviously not playing it. So I don't know why you would put it on, like, grade it with that on there instead of trying to do like you did and like gently take it off.
Well, that's a good idea. Maybe later on, once I get all my cards and comics that I want to get graded, the essentials all done, maybe I'll start looking into, okay, how much will a sealed copy of some of my favorite games, and I know they're probably a little more pricey, but something like Star Fox 64, like how much would that cost me? Maybe I should go get that, try to track that down, maybe try to get it graded, things like that like my childhood stuff. I'm not even going to bother with Pokemon.
Thankfully, too, they will grade non-sealed as well, so.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad
some stuff is a little too expensive.
Yeah, and I do think it's funny because comic books, when we send those in, and if they're bagged already, like pre-bagged, they open them. So I always thought that was kind of funny that they don't grade them sealed, but they will grade video games sealed.
Yeah, because I know Bobby asked about that, at one time, was like, or at MegaCon, because there was like the comic that was polybagged. It's like, do I need to, like, if I bust it open, is it still considered authentic? Because it had like a certificate of authenticity in there, like packaged with it. And they're like, yeah, we don't give a fuck. Like, we're not grading with the poly bag.
Yeah, and that's fine because, they're CGC. They're the premier comic grader. So if anyone's going to make that call, it's going to be them. I just hope they don't change their fucking mind on it later because I know I've got some comics that used to be polybagged that are now graded. So,
well, and I've got a few that were polybagged, but I've definitely opened them and read them. So,
yeah, there you go. Well, and that's the nice thing. At least that they would have opened them anyway. Sure, should you ever decide to get them graded?
Currently, yeah.
Well, there you go. Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of nerd talk, especially today as we went into some CGC stuff and gaming, future of the industry. Scott, I want to thank you for being on this week, and please let the Brocat Core know where they can find you and about your YouTube channel, Lazy Gaming Guys and Ronin Console.
So you can find me pretty much on Lazy Gaming Guys every Wednesday at about 10 to 10:30 Eastern PM. We stream different games. Like I said before, we have our game club. You can participate. Feel free to. What we do is pick a game every month currently. You play through it, and then we will discuss it. So chat is welcome to get involved and discuss the game as well if you played along. And then we will decide on our next one. But we do encourage it. It's just a fun time to talk about these different games. Sometimes they're games that you may have never given the time of day to. Like recently we did Undertale. I was never going to bother playing that game if it wasn't for Game Club. So that was interesting. And then you can also find me on the Ronin Council. That is a fun little anime and manga themed podcast that I do with Millennial Mike and Sam. So you can check that out on, I believe it's SoundCloud, the Exiles Network, and then /Ronin Council. So that's pretty much where you can find me. You can also find me in the Brocat Core Discord and on the Lazy Gaming Guys Discord and the Exiles Network Discord.
Awesome. And there will be links to everywhere you can find Scott on the description of today's episode. this week, if you want to help support the show, because it does have monthly costs, at a loss, of course, but this is a passion project of a podcast. But if you do want to contribute and help bring that cost down, head on over to patreon.com/thereasonsimebroke. And there are perks there, such as getting the episode early every single week and decals every single quarter straight from tpublic.com. But thank you so much for joining us again this week. I've been Daniel, joined by Scott, and Brocat Core. All will be well. Is there a game that you would personally want preserved for something that you could see yourself forever playing over and over again, even 50 years from now, that you would always want available at your beck and call? Let's say top three, because I know one of them is going to be Kingdom of Hearts. So it can't be Kingdom of Hearts 1, 2, and 3. But
the Kingdom Hearts series would always obviously be one of those things where I'm like, yes, I will play this multiple times.
Which one, if you have to pick one?
Typically, it's Kingdom Hearts 2.
That's a good one.
One I would play through multiple times. Like, if I had to pick out of the three. So let's see. I think the second one would probably be the Yakuza franchise, because they're just so much fun. The stories are just so great, and the amount of content in those games is so huge. You can just play them for hundreds of hours and never finish everything. So that's always just a really fun one to go back to quite often, and I would love to keep that available. Plus, I think that, the more people that discover it and experience it, the better.
Sure. I mean, the more games.
New generations to keep buying. Yeah. I would love new generations to keep experiencing it.
Is the third a Pokemon game?
I mean, it would be nice if Pokemon, like older Pokemon, were always around, in all honesty. Because it's one of those things of, I get that, there's always the new generation, the next generation of Pokemon. But it would be nice to have Pokemon Blue always available and Red, and to go back and play those. And with the 3DS eShop gone now, you can't. Like, that is gone. Same with the Pokemon trading card game and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say probably the early gens of Pokemon. Thankfully, most of them have been getting remakes and remasters. I'd like to see Gen 1 get a remake or remaster, because that one was for the GBA with Fire Red Leaf Green. So it'd be kind of nice to have a newer one.
Yeah, I guess they kind of considered Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee a little bit of one. I saw my son plays it. He likes it. And I guess it's got like Team Rocket and whatnot in it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a combination of red, blue, and green and yellow.
Yeah.
And then it also has like the multiplayer aspect, but it also has a lot of Pokemon Go stuff in it. So with like the candies and stuff like that.
Yeah, with how big that phenomenon was.
So I mean, it's a fine one, but I wouldn't exactly call it as much of a Red Blue remake, especially since, I mean, your starter is literally Pikachu or Eevee.
Right. A perfect IV one too at that, which is kind of nice.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect IV, perfect Eevee. It is literally a perfect statted one. And Eevee is the better choice.
Mm-hmm.
Just because Eevee gets moves for every single one of its evolutions. And those moves break the game in half.
Man.
Because its move for Jolteon will always paralyze 100% of the time.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And Flareons will always burn 100% of the time.
Does Vaporeons freeze all the time? Because I know you used to be able to learn. Oh, okay, man, that would have been nuts.
I know Espeons will confuse 100% of the time.
Nice. That's a good one too.
Yeah, I think Leafeon heals you. The Umbreon one also gives you barrier, like the barrier effect. Mm-hmm. So it raises your special defense. And the Espeon one not only confuses 100% of the time, it also gives you the other way, raises special attack. So like all of them have some other major benefit to the attack other than the attack. Whereas Pikachu, it has a move where it gets priority and can move faster. It gets extreme speed essentially.
All these special moves for Eevee, like the special effects and everything for the evolutions, reminds me of when I used to, I say play competitive, but I used to play online against people, and I, I'd have like all these I had some of my favorites, and then I had Pokemon that I think like were good stat wise. Like for example, Chansey, like fucking tank, right? Anytime I bring out that Chansey, half the time they would quit because she's such a tank, and I would just poison. Yeah. I would use Toxic and then Protect, and then Seismic Toss, and then when my health was low, I'd use the healing. It's like Egg something, and Soft Boil, and so I'd heal back up, and they'd still be dying from Toxic, and they'd be like, "Fuck this," and they would quit. But whenever I would have, whenever I'd have like Electivire or Magnetar, a lot of people don't know, but these Pokemon can learn these punching moves. So like Ice Punch and Fire Punch and Thunder Punch, even though they're not those types. And when I'd play people in person, they'd be like, "Oh, it's a hacked Pokemon." I'm like, "No, you can teach them these fucking moves." And people forget that those old Pokemon used to learn these wild TMs.
Well, one fun fact, like one Munchlax, which evolves into Snorlax, my favorite Pokemon, if you use the Pokewalker in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, you could get a Munchlax that natively knew self-destruct, which was great for a tank because essentially I could keep healing it up and Toxic you, and then if you're about to kill it, I can just
yeah.
Like, I quit. And yeah, people would just be like, "What the hell?" And it's like, yeah, it's only available from the Pokewalker in Heart Gold, Soul Silver.
God, I used to love Self-Destruct.
You also have some of these old ones. Oh God, Self-Destruct was great.
I used to get so many ties that way. Like my Pokemon's destroyed. Oh, so is theirs. And that was our last ones. The end.
Yeah, because back then I think it was deemed a tie, and then late I think it was Gen 2 or 3 that they finally were like, no, whoever used it, and if you both at the same time, whoever used it loses first.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Like their HP reaches 0 before the opponents, you lose.
No,
unless you have like another Pokemon. But yeah,
I'm calling them out on that one because if we're going by even the TCG rules, like we need to finish all the effects of that move of this turn, and that determines all the prizes, including draws. So that's how they should play it, man. Like the turn's not over yet. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. But like the Pokemon like video game does not, which is why Self-Destruct is not as tournament viable.
Ooh.